Welcome to Wisconsin DNR's Wild Wisconsin Off the Record podcast. Information straight from the source.
Welcome to another episode of Wisconsin DNR's Off the Record podcast. So as a reminder, what we're doing here is we really want to give you, as our users, some more background as to what we're doing in the field and in the office to improve your time in the outdoors, and hopefully taking some of these topics that may seem pretty complex or tough to understand at sometimes as to what our role is in something and kind of fleshing that out. And today is going to be a really good one. Whenever we can, we try to get partners on here. So we've got three guys from Vortex Optics, who is actually a sponsor for the web series this year, Wild Wisconsin, so be sure to check that out. And we've also got Jeff Guerard from Wisconsin Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. So two really strong partners for the department. We're really excited for this one. So today we're going to be talking about some of the challenges and opportunities that kind of go hand in hand with new technology that's out there in reaching hunters and outdoorsmen. So I think a lot of these things are going to apply to not only the hunting community, but also angling community, people who hike or just go outdoors. I'm hoping Jeff can touch on a lot of that too, as kind of how this all spider webs out from not just hunters, but everyone who likes to enjoy the outdoors. So we're going to talk about new technology, challenges that we have, opportunities that we see moving forward, and kind of what it all means for hunting as a whole moving forward. So I mentioned we're joined today by three guys from Vortex. We've got Mark Boardman, Erik Barber, and Jim Hamilton. And then from Wisconsin Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, we've got Jeff Guerard. And I am Sawyer Briel. I work with the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Division with Wisconsin DNR. So before we get started, I thought we'd give some background for the listeners. We'll start with you, Mark. Do you want to just touch briefly on kind of what you do at Vortex, where it all comes full circle, kind of where you guys fit in as a partner, and then just briefly your experience as a hunter and why this all applies to you?
So yeah, no, absolutely. So born and raised in Washington State, grew up in a hunting and fishing family. I mean, pretty much all my best memories revolve around those activities. Finished up school out there and definitely had a solid education, but knew what I probably knew how to do best was hunt and fish, and wanted to get a job, related to it. So worked for Cabela's at their headquarters for about 7 years in Sidney, Nebraska. And then got the opportunity at Vortex going on almost 10 years ago, and I haven't looked back, man. It's been an amazing company, and, just really in line with, who I am personally and what I'm about, and also, the issues that I care about, so it couldn't be a better fit.
Mm-hmm. Jim, how about you?
Been in Wisconsin my whole life, and really, I guess, the whole early on part of my life, it wasn't exactly, I'd say, hunting focused family that I grew up in. I have two of my older brothers, I'd say, are pretty hardcore hunters. They get into it quite a bit. I tended to follow the steps of my other older brother, who was really into sports. So I hit the sports thing hard. Got out of school, and then now being at Vortex, being here for a while, I mean, I've always loved the idea of hunting. I think hunting is pretty sweet. I don't have probably as extensive of an experience in hunting as really everybody else in the room here, but getting pretty pumped for it. Looking to go actually to Nebraska this year, do a little muzzleloader hunting there. Have done some hog hunting, occasional things like that. But in some ways, I'm probably similar. I guess working at Vortex, I'm not exactly similar to some of these people that we're going to be talking about, but a relatively newer hunter. So, yeah.
That's great, because I think that's a really important person to have at the table when we're having these discussions. That's awesome to hear that you're looking to get into it. So I think, Jim, you're really going to bring a good perspective to the discussion here. Erik, how about you? Erik, I will mention Erik is ex-DNR, so I think he's gonna be able to tell both stories here, which I think will be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that is the, I guess my kind of personal perspective is, I like Mark, grew up in a hunting and a really outdoors-minded family. I mean, didn't really get die hard into hunting until, I was, I guess probably 15, 16 years old. But so like most of my childhood memories are like growing up camping and stuff like that, just anything kind of outside. My first job out of college was working for a media company in the hunting industry where we filmed and edited, whitetail hunts. And that brought one perspective to me. And following that, I worked for the DNR, which was the total opposite side of the spectrum. So it was kind of unique to compare and contrast those. And now from there, I'm here at Vortex. So, my job revolves around a lot of like helping people out with questions that they have, whether it's someone who's a total expert way over my head, or someone who's brand new to it. So I kind of get to see a lot of different interest levels and a lot of different, I guess, stakeholder groups of what the people are that are buying hunting and fishing licenses.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm the chairman of the Wisconsin chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers here. And we are a nonprofit organization that works on behalf of public lands and public waters in Wisconsin. Professionally, that's a volunteer position. Professionally, I'm an attorney in Milwaukee. I wish I could spend more time outdoors than I do, but as far as hunting and fishing experience or hunting experience, I've been hunting as long as I've been able to tag along with my dad, here in Wisconsin and out west. So I think this is an important topic, communicating not only with other hunters, but all the stakeholders we have. And from a BHA perspective, those stakeholders are extremely important in public lands.
So before we get started, I mentioned that we're going to be talking about a lot of new tools that are available to all of us as we communicate with hunters, and on the flip side, hunters that communicate with us. So I wanted to share just a few brief stats here to maybe give you some perspective as we're talking about these things. So we're going to talk a little bit about podcasts today. Obviously, we're on one right now, but over 525,000 active podcast channels are out there with over 18.5 million episodes. So that is pretty ridiculous. And we're going to talk about info overload later too. Maybe that applies here, maybe it doesn't. 44% of the U.S. population has listened to a podcast, the majority being at home, in the cars next. So some more interesting stuff. And for social media as a whole, which we're also going to talk about. So in 2012, the average internet user had 3 social media accounts. Any guesses how many they have now, guys? 7. He is reading the sheet. Just caught him.
Oh, wait,
I just caught him looking at the sheet.
Not 6, 7.
It was weird, actually. I was
Seven's a key
looking in
number.
the direction of the sheet, but I was totally zoned out. 7 just came to my mind.
And then social media and messaging services account for roughly 1 in every 3 minutes users spend on the internet. So think about all the time you spend on the internet and think about all the time that you're on social media. Maybe it applies to you, maybe it doesn't, but to me that's pretty eye-opening. 79% of internet users use Facebook. 70% of U.S. adults between the ages of 18 to 29 are on Facebook. 1 million hours of video is viewed daily on the platform. And then just to touch briefly on Instagram, 800 million users worldwide for Instagram, so that's a platform that's growing. 35% of Instagram users check Instagram multiple times a day, and 51% open the app daily. That probably sounds about right for me,
Yeah.
especially with work and personal. But so I just wanted to do that to set the stage a little bit, to give you guys some perspective as we're talking about these tools and kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So getting into it here, we'll start with the Vortex guys here. So at Vortex, what is your guys' overall focus in the message that you're trying to share? Kind of who are you trying to reach, and what are your goals in doing so? It might be too broad of a question, but maybe we can start getting into it.
I guess, from my perspective, just because I do a lot of communicating back and forth with, our customers and just Vortex Nation as a whole, it's people of like all different interest levels. It might be someone who is a, 15-year-old person who's just getting into shooting and wants to figure out how to get a scope on their 22. Or it might be someone who's a diehard, long-range competition shooter or Western hunter that wants the best optic for their hunting rifle or whatever. And from my perspective, it's just a lot of coaching those people through, helping them kind of realize what would be the best fit for them and kind of play that like liaison approach or role, I guess, in when it comes to them like making a purchase decision, whether that's through us or someone else out there. We just kind of want people to be as educated as they can be about, whatever it is that they're buying. I guess I'm sure you guys would add something to that too.
Yeah, I think in terms of, especially since we're talking a lot about hunters here, and then social media and kind of who we reach, how we try to do it. It sounds funny to say at first, but realistically speaking, I think that like if you just enjoy hunting, and genuinely, like I mean, genuinely really enjoy it, for the activity of doing it, getting the meat afterwards, and just getting outside and doing something that we all love to do, then that's kind of who we're trying to talk to, I guess. We've said it many times just internally. We try never to take ourselves too seriously. So we try not to, turn hunting into a big competition where, all of a sudden we're making enemies within the hunting community with other people who, that's not really what we're into. It's all kind of a, same team kind of thing. Supporting each other, and different people might have different interests within hunting, and we think that's pretty cool, and so we're all about it, just as long as we're getting out and appreciating the natural resources that we have here, and yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you hit on something, really solid there, and it maybe, extends beyond hunting, but hunting means there's definitely commonalities, right? Probably between all of us that sit in the room that hunt, right? But it also means different things to different people, and I think, one thing we really try to do, like Jim said, is respect those things, and we may have, maybe put varying weight on different aspects of the hunt, but the important thing is that we're all out in the field, and, as long as you're following the game laws, I think it's up to the individual to interpret, why they want to be out there, so I think that's another big deal. And then as far as communicating, with those different groups, Jim talked about, not taking ourselves too seriously, and we're all human beings, right? And so just, talking with folks like you're riding in the pickup, I think that's important. I think people appreciate that, and they're going to, I think everybody will connect better that way, and you're going to be able to get your message across. They're going to be able to understand it and interpret it, clearly, and, you'll be on your way to, either getting them the proper information and maybe ultimately recruiting some new folks as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because of the people who we work, I'd say our primary market has just gravitated out west, and even I myself, maybe it comes from the sports background and stuff, but I tend to gravitate towards adventurous and more extreme style of hunting. Maybe that's more like mountainous, or that's definitely what I see myself doing more in the future as I get into it more. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to poo-hoo anybody who just goes out once a year and sits in a tree stand in Wisconsin. That's their thing, and it's cool.
Absolutely.
And I think that the more that people tend to start to poo-hoo the way other people do it, it just again creates the rifts, like I said, which we don't need to get totally into yet. But that's kind of our perspective. So.
And I mentioned the group we had today. I really wanted to bring these groups to the table because you got Vortex, private industry, hunting industry, shooting sports. More than that, you've got Jeff, which is a non-governmental organization, and then you've got the DNR, who is obviously a government agency. So obviously with a company like Vortex, their goals, I think at the very base layer, you're going to see are just intertwined so closely with BHA and with DNR, but obviously they're private industry, so they're trying to sell a product. So that makes it a little different for you guys, but I think as we get into it, we're really going to see that at that really under the surface level of how we're communicating and why, I think we're going to see some patterns here. So Jeff, how about you?
From BHA's perspective, I mean, the communication that we have with our members and being able to articulate the message that we have is extremely important. Social media, it's done some really good things. There's been a couple of federal bills that were proposed that BHA got on top of very quickly, and our members got on social media and got after some of these politicians on some of those bills, and it killed them, frankly. And it's extremely important. But I think, there's two sides of that coin, kind of like Jim was talking about earlier here. We don't want to be trying to compete with everybody for the greatest Instagram photo you've ever seen in your life about, the only good hunt is a Dall sheep hunt in the Alaskan range. That hunt is just as good as a tree stand hunt here in Wisconsin. So I think it's there are two sides of the social media coin. It is very good for getting a message out, though. I mean, I'm not a big social media guy. I don't really enjoy it all that much, but I've seen the power that it has, and it's extremely important.
So would it be safe to say that Vortex, you guys are more in the product side of things? BHA, you guys are considered maybe more of an advocacy, down that advocacy vein. Would that be safe to say?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then DNR for us, I would consider more of like the education kind of regulation side of things, policy side of things. So like I mentioned before, kind of 3 different things all converging in the middle, as we're going to find out here. But so Jeff, you started touching on it there, but can you talk about maybe the communication tools that we have in 2018? I think all of us are a little different in age, but I think we've all seen it change quite a bit. So maybe we'll start again with the Vortex guys, but can you talk about maybe how the tools have changed that are available to you guys, even maybe in the last couple of years, or kind of how you're using those to get your message out?
I mean, we really only started hitting Instagram hard within like the last 2.5 years, so there's one, and a lot of the video content has really started to burst at the seams lately, and it's been very clear that in order to sort of entertain or keep the masses of people following you, you kind of need to be a content creating machine. So that's definitely been something that we've seen a lot. It used to be back in the day, our teams dedicated to making photos and catalogs and videos, whether it be a video that's about a cool hunt and explaining customer story, or a video about a product that you have explaining how to use it and how to be a proper end user for that product. We might have had 1 or 2 people in the past, but now that team has grown quite a bit, and you just got to keep putting stuff out there. And I just think even the video and photo editing software and the cameras and things like that have gotten a lot easier to use. You don't necessarily need to have a master's degree in those products or softwares to use them. So a lot of people have just been self-taught now. So you're sort of competing for people's attention a lot more nowadays.
Yeah, and the unintended consequence of that is there's more resources out there right now than there ever has been. There's no better time to be getting into hunting or fishing or whatever hobby it is that you have, just plain and simple because of the amount of resources that are out there. If you want to learn how to ride a dirt bike, there's a million different videos about how to make that thing go fast. Same thing with hunting.
I watched a couple of those this spring, actually.
Same thing with hunting. Whether you just want to figure out how to get into hunting, there's a million resources out there for that. Or if you're already a hunter and you want to take it to the next level, there's resources for that. So that's just an unintended consequences of all that stuff that we now kind of have at our disposal. So.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, there's definitely more information and resources than ever, which is an amazing thing. But, I mean, there's definitely, some places where you need to separate the wheat from the chaff a little bit, as a consumer of that content. But I think folks are in general, I mean, they're pretty smart, and you can tell, what is good or what isn't good. And just to touch on podcasts, or even we've recently launched a podcast as well. I mean, you mentioned there's a lot of them out there, but they're all a little bit different. I think they're going to hit a little bit of a different niche. So when people are looking for or searching for certain information, I think overall they're going to find different homes, right? And there's only so many hours in a day, and if something is kind of fitting, your media consumption needs, if you will, you can definitely find it. And I'll take that a step further. One thing that I think is amazing about really maybe podcasts and YouTube videos in particular is you can listen to an hour-long podcast on a certain subject, and you can soak in really a lifetime of knowledge from a person. I've listened to a bunch myself, and it's holy mackerel. I just learned 30 years of elk hunting experience in an hour that I can go take to the woods. And man, I mean, particularly whether you're a seasoned elk hunter or whatever the subject might be, or you're just getting into it, I mean, you're just so many steps ahead than you would have been without that information at your fingertips.
YouTube University is a real thing. It's people these days know so much more, I feel like, about anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, the saying is always that when you were in a group of people and there's a question, you kind of just all agreed that it wouldn't get answered, or maybe it'd pop in someone's mind 3 days later and you'd give them a call and tell them, but now it's 2 seconds, Google it.
Yeah.
So whether that's made conversation better or worse, I'm not sure. I think we can talk about that. But Mark, what you mentioned with the niche thing, I think is really interesting because over 500,000 active podcast channels. So if you want to learn to play checkers upside down in a bat cave, like there might be a podcast out there for that. So
Jim, Google it.
Fact check. So would you guys, as Vortex say, would you say social media is your most important tool right now for kind of achieving your goals and getting where you want to go? Would that be fair to say, or is there a different one out there that's...
I mean, you're asking, all three of us are in the marketing team, so, we might say something like that. Whereas it's hard to say what's the most important goal for Vortex. I'd say overall, we can't pick one platform, whether that be social media, whether that be, print, whether it be just, whatever it is. It's hard to say what's most important as far as the department goes or something like that. But the most important thing for us has always been wherever the customer is, that's where we are. And, so that's probably why we have a bigger than normal team of people who are on the phones at all times.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we have a bigger than normal team of people on social media and in a lot of other areas is just to be wherever the customer is to, help them out at any time.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. I mean, that's one thing I was going to touch on too is like, you brought up earlier, Sawyer, like, okay, we're more on the product side, but in some ways, I don't ever forget that, right? But to Jim's point, like the ultimate goal is serving the customer, and part of that service is providing them with a great product, right? But also along with that, I think one of the fun aspects of our job is we get to serve the customer maybe in some different ways, whether that's providing something that might simply just be entertaining, or providing that information. It's like, yeah, I guess that sale is maybe ultimately the bottom line somewhere, but we get to focus, I guess, on a different step of that process.
Yep.
I'm glad you touched on that. I think that's an really important point to make.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, we're going to get to you next. Before that, I just wanted to remind for people listening, we're talking about communicating with hunters in 2018. We've got 3 guys from Vortex here. We've got Jeff from Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. We've got the DNR perspective as well. So, Jeff, do you want to touch on that too? Kind of communication tools in 2018, kind of what's available. What do you guys like to use? I know you touched on social media a little bit too. You mentioned grassroots. So do you want to kind of touch on where you guys are at and what your valuable tools may be?
Yeah, I mean, I'll touch on what we use here in Wisconsin. I mean, I can't speak a whole lot about what the organization uses internally nationally because I'm not there. But I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of what Mark said about podcasts and gaining this vast amount of knowledge in a short amount of time, especially when it comes to issues like public land advocacy or public waters advocacy. Before social media and before podcasts, you would have had to do a lot of research on certain bills and the history of public lands and how they came about, when now you can, turn on your iPhone, plug on a podcast, and in 2 hours you have all of that information there ready to go, and it gives you ammunition to use when you're talking to politicians or people who may not be on the same side as we are for public land. So podcasts are a big deal in BHA. I mean, I've talked to, countless members who said that, I always ask, how did you find out about BHA? Oh, I found out through, his podcast or this guy's podcast. I mean, it's amazing how many people find out about the organization through podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
So they're extremely important. I mean, yeah, we use Instagram, we use Facebook. We have our Facebook page in Wisconsin is very good with having policy discussions. There's always good discussions. Most of the time people don't agree, and that's great. Like I tell everyone all the time, like dissent is good. I think it's good to have dissent. We don't always want to be thinking the same thing all the time.
Echo chamber, yeah.
Exactly,
Yep.
yeah. And especially with, BHA is a young organization. Like you said, Sawyer, we're all relatively the same age, I think, here. And we're all like-minded, and I think it's good to kind of get some dissent sometimes because we don't always want to have the same thoughts. But, Instagram and Facebook are great for getting stuff out as far as if a bill is trying to be passed in the Wisconsin legislature, before you'd have to wait for the paper the next day and not everyone would read it. Well, I think you said there's 800 million people on Instagram, right? And so if there's a bill that comes out, we know about it, and bang, bang, you make an Instagram post or it's posted on Facebook and people know about it immediately. So it's amazing tool for
then
that type of thing.
the shareability of that stuff too.
Right.
Like you're not necessarily back in the day gonna, fold up your newspaper and put it in the mail and email it to your buddy Bob, right?
Right.
You might call him on the phone and, maybe you just do it a different way. But
Yep.
I mean, it just seems like to be able to instantly in the moment say, yep, I know some people that I think might be interested in this, click a button and have them have that information at their fingertips is, pretty impactful. And it's funny, you talk about social, and this is actually BHA related. I recently learned, it was kind of like a specific fact related to an issue, related to BHA on a YouTube video that the Hush guys produced with Ty Stubblefield from BHA. You know what I mean? So, and that was just a couple days ago, and I wouldn't have known that one part of the issue had I not tuned into that.
Right.
And we're talking about here things that require an action, whether it's, standing up for a bill that or opposing a bill that's going to, turn negative implications against public access. We need people to, like you mentioned, Mark, if they have a newspaper in their hand, they have to then put that newspaper down and, make that action from somewhere else. Well, now today we live in a world where you have your phone on you, which is probably where you're consuming your social media or whatever it is. You get that, you see it on there. Now you can, right at the same device, make that reach out and that communication, whatever it is. So you can make that action right from the same device that you're using to consume your information on. So I think that's a really interesting paradigm right now, because not only are we learning stuff, but we can act with what we learn all right in the same, without even getting out of the chair. So,
And sometimes it's my GPS.
yeah.
That's a great point, because it's important that people actually do take that step, though, like you were talking about, Eric. So if you do see something that, hey, I don't agree with this, BHA posted this is bad for public lands, make the comment on the Instagram post, make the comment on the Facebook page, but then also actually dial the phone number that's on there and let whoever that person is know, hey, I don't agree with this, I'm not happy about this.
And that's something that is relevant for DNR too, that I'll just touch on briefly, is on a lot of our social media posts or something, you'll see someone comment, I'm opposed to this. And for them, it just kind of ends there. So I think there's this expectation that while it's gotten easier to provide feedback, the approved channels are still there that you need to follow, whether that's writing a letter, sending an official email, or things like that. So while I think on a broad scale it's gotten easier to share feedback, I think people sometimes misunderstand that with actually submitting public comment. So I think that's an important thing to touch on.
Well, and elaborating a little bit, like saying I'm opposed to this. I mean, that's fantastic that person has an opinion on that issue, but that also may not tell the people that are listening a lot about what exactly they're opposed to, or maybe in what way they're opposed to something. So whether the comment is, positive or negative, I mean, you don't need to write a Hemingway letter, but some sort of insight into what they mean by their comment is definitely welcome.
Yeah, and this is talked about in English classes across the world, or across the U.S. especially nowadays in school, where the social media has kind of bred this culture of shorthand a lot. Where people feel that people just see something and the first thing that pops to their head, they just comment it and then they go on with their lives. They probably don't even remember what they commented 10 minutes later.
Yep.
And to stop and think about a little bit what you're about to say will not only help your case, but it'll also help whoever you're trying to tell it to understand what you're trying to say. Because, oftentimes, if you just see no thanks or boo or whatever, it just, I respect your opinion, but I have no idea what you're trying to tell me.
Right.
Exactly. So before we keep moving on, I'll just give DNR's kind of overview and perspective briefly. I want to let these guys do the majority of the talking, but I think we're a little different just because obviously the majority of what I do is with hunting, fishing, state parks, things like that. But DNR is a huge agency with kind of a broad scope of things that we do. So that's everything from environmental management to zoning, things like that. So I think I'm really confident that the things that we're talking about apply broadly, but I also am trying to drill down just to hunters and kind of outdoors men and women here. So I think that's important to keep in mind. And as far as tools, we use social media, all those things. We're trying to stay modern and stay relevant. In fact, we have to. So there's a lot of pressure on our end. We really have to stay modern and make what we share appealing to people. So that's something that we work hard on. But so to kind of switch gears a little bit here, this is a tough question. So what we've been talking about now is really general and really kind of what do you guys do? What do you guys think? So this is, what do you think has changed? We mentioned communication, social media has changed over the past 5-10 years. So we're talking about the hunting industry and hunting. What do you guys think has changed over the past 5 to 10 years? And maybe we can get into some of the challenges that's presented or maybe opportunities. So what do you guys think? It's a tough question. It's a really broad question, but I think it might kind of help steer what we're talking about.
I'd say one thing has been we're in kind of a limbo time right now where you have, I think, a lot of hunters out there that are they go by the traditional way of doing things that have been done for many years, and you have a lot of new hunters now too. And I think that a lot of the new hunters are coming in probably via the social media kind of avenues, because I think they've seen a lot of that aspirational stuff that people post on social media. I mean, you mentioned earlier, Mark, you mentioned the Hush Guys. And the Hush Guys, they made a brand and lifestyle out of hunting and fishing. And I'm sure that a lot of people that follow their channel or watch their videos either didn't used to hunt or don't hunt, but now they're interested in it. And I think that, you know, you've got these younger generations that kind of like to do things their own way and stuff like that. So I've noticed that it can be a little difficult at times when you try to maybe, you know, as us talking on social media and maybe even developing products, you try to keep up with kind of the new trends, but also respect tradition. And that doesn't always go hand in hand. Sometimes those two sides are opposing, you know, and so that, I think that's been a little bit of a difference in the hunting industry lately, and I think it's been a slight challenge, but I personally think it's cool at the same time, though. I guess that you know, even though maybe some people try to buck the trend a little bit or try to be a little bit different, it's just I have seen a lot more hunting. And as a relatively newer hunter myself, I'd say that back when I was really into the sports and in high school and college, I didn't see a whole lot of hunting content out there, and it just wasn't as prevalent, and that's probably part of the reason why I didn't, you know, quit a few of my sports and go hunting as much. But now I see it everywhere.
We got you now, Jim. That's the important.
Yeah.
So.
And one thing that's changed for us too is that we're really careful to keep an eye on, and I'm sure you guys are the same, is say 10 years ago when social media wasn't as big. You've got the outdoor newspapers, outdoor writers, which continue to be incredibly important to sharing our message. But with these new tools, we're gung-ho. We love them. We love using them. We're really dialing it up on using them. But we need to be careful not to forget that segment of the population that doesn't consume their media and their news that way. So that's something that we've had to be really careful. If you think about switching the regulations to a digital version, things like that. Those are just things that we need to really keep an eye on. And while these things are great, we have to remember that there's this huge segment of the population that just isn't quite there yet and might not get there.
Yeah. You still can't quite say yet when somebody asks, I never heard about this. You still can't quite, we're not to the point where you can say, oh, we posted about it on Facebook, you must have missed it. You know, it's like there's some people out there that...
Well, and that's we're losing that generation of hunters too. I mean, we see a lot more hunting content now because we're probably looking for it, but the facts are that hunting licenses continue to decline every single year. So while there is more content, and I guess it's out there and it's in front of us more, like we're losing hunters every single year, and I think it's because we don't have enough of the younger generation to make up for the older generation that either can't do it anymore or is unwilling to do it anymore. And I know from BHA's perspective, you know, we're doing everything we can to bring in new hunters. I mean, we our chapter started a learn to bow hunt program here in Wisconsin. So we are teaching, you know, brand new bow hunters, people how to bow hunt. I know the DNR does a learn to hunt for food program where they teach new hunters, you know, take them out. They do it with turkeys and deer. And so those, getting the message out about those type of programs to get people to do this type of thing is really important, because we are losing more hunters than we're gaining right now.
And the interesting thing about that is, like you mentioned, Jim, there's so many platforms out there right now, and we're seeing all this content. We all have social media accounts of our own, and we all make posts on them occasionally, just like a lot of the listeners probably that are listening to this. With that said, there's so much content out there, so when you hit post on something, I think there's another aspect that goes into it. When you make that out there, it's out for everyone to see. So if you just jump on Instagram right now and search for the hashtag hunting, you're going to see everything from someone making a really aspirational post about what the sport means to them, and you might see a picture that doesn't do the sport justice, or maybe sheds a negative connotation against it. So that,
or what could just be perceived as.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge, like you asked, Sawyer, is that's a challenge for people, because what you might be numb to as a hunter. You might be used to a deer with its tongue hanging out and blood all over the place. Here we are talking about recruiting new hunters. If I'm someone who's never seen a dead animal, never cut into the backstrap of an animal that was alive an hour ago, and I see blood and foam coming out of the mouth of something, that might shine a little different light on it. So although one group might be numb to that, we're really, at the end of the day, all of us that are sitting at this table want to grow this base of people. So it's important to really kind of think before you throw something out into the web world.
That's something, I think you nailed it right there, and is exactly, or not exactly, but what I was going to bring up as a challenge is, like, as a hunter, the rest of this, as a hunter, the rest of the story, right? Or, but with social media, oftentimes the content, the brevity of the content, I think, is a challenge, because you're not getting the entire story. You are getting that snapshot. So, like I said, we've hunted, been around deer, taking it from that A to Z process of, from essentially from the field to the freezer, right? And everything that went into that experience. But like you said, when you post that picture, that's just that one tiny little brief snapshot. But on the flip side, a big positive that I've seen in the last 5 years is really the celebration and honoring of the food component of hunting. Which again, like, I've been eating deer my whole life, but I haven't necessarily talked about it that much, or so it's essentially like, on my Instagram page, there's probably as many food pictures as there are, whatever, animal pictures or whatever, what have you, just because they're really equally important in my book.
Yeah. And for someone listening who's like, well, why the heck are these guys? Why should all this be interesting to me? They're talking about how they communicate with hunters. I already hunt, whatever. The big picture of all this is we have to be so careful and really think about this and get your feedback and your help. Or, the hunting culture, I'm not going to sit here and say it's going to be gone in 10 years, but as Jeff mentioned, it's declining. So we really need to, like I mentioned, stay current, stay relevant, or, we're seeing this culture decline.
Yeah.
I'd be curious, those numbers, you can't argue with them, they are going down. But I'd be curious if there was some way to get numbers of people who are interested in hunting versus people who actually go out and get tags and things like that. I think that we keep talking about things like social media and whatnot. We mentioned earlier, you don't know something, just Google it. Like, these days, if people can't figure out something or do something in like less than 30 seconds, they're like, not worth it, And I think you got the lifestyle now where it's like, hey, the kid's in basketball, then I take him to oboe practice, then I take him to piano lessons, then I take him home and he does homework and he goes to sleep, and then I hang out with my wife or whatever, or my husband, whoever you are, and like, there's so much stuff going on that hunting has always been a sport where it's like you take the time, and it's kind of a, oh gosh, what am I trying to say? It's like, it takes time to go on a hunt, and it's also
an investment.
It's an investment, and it's a activity where you're almost remiss to not take the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you just did some run and gun hunt, sure. I'm not gonna poo-hoo that. If that's your thing, like go for it. If that's the only way you can get it done, go for it. Right?
Sometimes that's all you got.
Yeah. But I think that a lot of people who do the run and gun style kind of hunt, many times might wish that they had the chance to kind of be outdoors and be in the fresh air and a little bit longer, you know. And
I'd say that's probably always the case. You
Yeah.
know, but you're just, time. I always say, time and money, man. Those are generally the finite resources of, limiting that time in the field. But, man, if there's anybody out there that hasn't tried hunting or even fishing, a big thing that gets thrown around right now, and maybe I'm kind of rabbit trailing here, but, people like to throw around the phrase being present, right? Like, oh, are you present, man? There is no other time, at least I know in my life personally, where I am completely present, wrapped up in the moment, nothing else in, like, work, stress, whatever, none of those things are going on. Like, completely present, wrapped up in the moment. Every sense is completely in tune. Every twig snap, every bird, every squirrel, hopefully some, hearing some deer hooves in the leaves, I'm just getting excited thinking about it, right?
hold on. What was your point? Calm down.
Yeah, I don't know. I want to go deer hunting. I'm grabbing my bow. But I think if that's what somebody's looking to get, that is definitely a way to get that.
And going off that, if you are someone who your exposure to this has only been at Christmas time, you see the pictures that your cousins or family members have from hunting, and all it is someone holding a deer, and you think that's all that's all you're getting out of it. There's so much more. Like if you look at some of these other channels out there, like Modern Huntsman is one that comes to mind that is so great at showing the little moments that, like you mentioned, Mark, that go into hunting. You're going to see things being out in the woods, whether you kill a deer or not. You're going to see things that you flat out will not see if you don't put yourself in that place and time, So it comes into just being out there and getting yourself in that arena where you can have that experience, and then you're going to start opening up a whole new, list of things that you can receive, I guess, or perceive.
That's the $1 million question: is how do we communicate that using the tools that we have? And Jim, I think you had a really good point. I wish we could know how many people were interested in it but haven't done it. From DNR's perspective, and this is a perfect example of something that applies to not only what I do, kind of creating awareness for hunting and why it's important, but for the whole department, is we don't go to work assuming that we are going to recruit every person in the state to hunt. It's not realistic. It wouldn't be a good use of our time to even assume that. So what we're really working on right now, and social media is helping, is creating awareness for what our staff are doing out in the field that's directly affecting their time when they're out there deer hunting or hiking, staying relevant, using new tools, and just helping people get an understanding at the very basic level of why people do this and why it's important and what it's all about. And then just kind of, if they can be an advocate for hunting without hunting, I'm going to call that a win.
Oh, big time.
Yep.
From my perspective.
Yep.
So I think we went a little bit off trail there, but I think that was a really good kind of discussion. Did anyone else have anything to add there? So kind of wrapping that up, we're talking about communicating to hunters in 2018, but I think a really good side note there was what we need to communicate about hunting as a whole and why it's important. So talking about social media, actually I will add one more thing about the hunting industry because I didn't mention it. To touch on the YouTube University thing, the two things that I've noticed, and I grew up going to the video store and getting the Primos videos and all that, the two things I've noticed is hunting's gotten more polished as to what we see, and Erik, I think you touched on that, no tongue hanging out or anything like that. And I think the way it's shared has really spiderwebbed. You mentioned YouTube University. You've got this whole niche of people, the DIY hunters. You've still got the trophy guys, that's fine. And then you've got the subsistence, learn to hunt for food type of people too. So from my perspective, I think it's really just spiderwebbed. It's not just one vein of going out and shooting a big buck. I just think it's changed a little bit from that side of things as well.
Totally.
So for social media, obviously we all have that person who shares way too much. Probably multiple people. Jeff smiled over there. He definitely does. But so do you think the wealth of information available out there, and we mentioned being able to Google an answer in 2 seconds, has that created problems for what you guys are trying to do and kind of this whole idea as a whole?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, 3 letters, CWD. Google that, and you get a whole bunch of misinformation out there. And, you know, and unless you take the time to go through and figure out who owns that website and who wrote this particular article and see what that person's agenda is, I mean, you're going to get a whole ton of just terrible misinformation out there. So, you know, especially with people who kind of come into that particular issue and other issues with an agenda, yeah, you're going to get a lot of misinformation. And there's too much information out there then.
Credentials, man.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
anybody can make a screen name, put up an avatar, and then say they've been, you know, some forest ranger, you know, for a million years, and they guided in all these states, and they did this, and then they say something that's totally wrong. You know, I mean, anybody can say that.
No, they did do that, Jim. I saw it on the internet.
Oh, you did. Oh, I'm sorry. Never mind.
No, I mean that's a huge thing. I mean, there are no gatekeepers anymore when it comes to media, right? Like if you want to be a content creator, you can be a content creator, and there's, you know, I mean, we've been talking about a lot of the good of that, right? And I think there's amazing good attached to that, but there is some bad where, you know, not every website or every article or video has a fact checker.
Right.
A great example is literally what went on yesterday with that conversation we were having with the guy who had an issue with a red dot, where he was seeing a different image, and it turned out that he had his brightness turned up too much into his red dot. Well, that guy had all these people supporting his theory. Same exact thing can be said about CWD. Someone posts a personal experience, and they get people jumping on that. You have the bandwagon effect of people jumping on there. All of a sudden, one thought turns into all the supporting claims, and now it's true by all standards of the definition. When in reality, the solution, it couldn't be further from what you know is actually being posted about.
And once people determine they want to be part of a bandwagon, it's like when somebody actually does come in to dispute that argument, it's good luck, man.
Yeah.
You know?
There's something to be said. I mean, people want to be part of something, and I can't sit here and fault them for that. But just like I mentioned, it wouldn't be fair to assume that we're going to recruit everyone as a hunter over the next 5 years. Just don't assume that everything out there on social media or whatever is factual or is going to apply to how you choose to kind of look at a certain topic. But I would compare it to like chain letters. Like I would say it's the equivalent of like a chain letter today, where something just takes off and you almost just you can't control it from there, especially on social media, whether it's right, wrong, or in between. Once it gets some steam, it's gone.
Yeah.
Well, and then if there is some misinformation, you know, perpetrated on the front end, maybe it's corrected at some point, even publicly. Not everybody who saw the original is going to tune back in to find out.
Good
'Cause
luck.
there's so
Good luck
much.
trying to get them to tune back in.
Right.
Well, and plus too, then you have just the inevitable game of telephone as well. I mean, you could even say something exactly correct on social media, and it's just heck. Sometimes it's your iPhone's typo.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden that turns into something else, and then somebody says, "Oh, I think I heard something along these lines," and then all of a sudden the next person takes that as gospel and says, "Oh yeah, I heard this for sure," and the game of telephone just winds up, you know. So that's why we've even talked about in social media here at Vortex, and I'm sure you guys at BHA have said the same, and you guys at the DNR have said the same, where it's like, if you're gonna say something out there, like, you better make sure that if people read it, like, they're going to get the right message. It's undisputable, mess upable. I know there's a proper word for that, but I can't think of it.
Nailed it.
But like, it's black and white.
Right.
You don't want to put any gray areas out there, because all of a sudden you might get misquoted or whatever. And,
And then you get the power of reach with all this stuff too. I mean, you and I did a podcast just over a year ago with Brian Richards about CWD. You know, we tried to get that out there as best as we could. we flat out don't have the reach that Joe Rogan does. I would venture to guess
Not
you
yet.
you and
Off the record podcast coming soon.
Yeah.
You and I, haven't even talked about this, but I would venture to say that since that Joe Rogan podcast, the amount of inquiries about CWD and stuff is just, I would imagine, is off the hook.
That is a perfect example of kind of the power of social media and how word travels quickly, and also how people are choosing to absorb information. They will listen to a 2-hour podcast. We now know that for a fact, which is really interesting moving forward. So, as a reminder, people listening, we're talking about communicating with hunters, new technology, pitfalls, good things. So I thought maybe what we do now is talk about maybe the biggest challenges our groups have. So we mentioned we've got private industry, we've got BHA, we've got DNR, government agencies. So maybe we'll start with BHA this time. Jeff, what do you guys think is the biggest challenge that you have in communicating with hunters in 2018?
I think I said this before when I asked a lot of our members, how did you find out about BHA? It's honestly this podcast or that podcast. We need to branch out a little bit more from just people listening to podcasts and going on social media. And it is difficult because, when, I'm obviously right in the center of this thing, so I talk with a lot of BHA members, and most of the members I talk with about hunting and fishing is all BHA people. So the biggest challenge, I think, for us is just reaching outside of that core group of people and trying to expand our message out to everyone, because I think the message that we have, keeping public lands in public hands, resonates with not only hunters but hikers and bikers and bird watchers and anyone who wants to go on public land. So I think our greatest challenge is just to expand out of just this small core hunting community that we have here.
Yeah, I think we're all guilty of staying in our silos at times, which for better or worse, we may get comfortable or know we're going to get a certain reaction from that group, so maybe that's the only people we reach out to. But I think that's an excellent point, Jeff. I think very well said. I think that would apply to all of us, I'm sure. But so what about you from the Vortex perspective, guys?
I guess, I'll build a little bit on what Jeff was saying there, but we're talking about declining hunter numbers, right? And I think ultimately, if we want hunting to continue and hopefully be more mainstream, you took something that at one time was probably the most natural thing in the world, and now all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but over time, not as many people participate in it, right? And I'm not sure, I think you can definitely help recruit people with a social post, and way including myself in this statement. But it's more the grassroots of if you can find that person that maybe is on the fence or is showing a slight interest. And again, I'm telling myself this as much as I'm telling anybody else. Make an effort to bring that person, afield and let them or be with them and hear the woods wake up, and see and witness these things, and maybe hopefully potentially have a quote unquote successful hunt where you're able to take a game animal, maybe any sort of game animal, and it doesn't have. I feel like personally, I get primarily I'm big game focused, right? That's probably where a lot of my passions lie. But a new hunter doesn't need to go shoot a buck or a doe or whatever. It could be as simple as a waterfowl hunt or a squirrel hunt, and maybe that's the best place to start, right? Because it is a more social type. It's okay to talk a little bit. There's maybe not as much pressure or
it's more social. I think it's fair to say it's more social.
It's more social, and it doesn't take maybe necessarily the time.
It's not usually 10 degrees below zero when you're doing that either.
It's not 10 degrees below zero. You're not working a week for that one opportunity.
Right.
So I guess it doesn't really necessarily pertain to social media, but more of that grassroots of taking that person that may have an interest and truly introducing them to the sport, on that personal level.
Yeah, I think as somebody who, I've said it I guess a couple times, but I guess I didn't used to hunt a ton, or really, and now I'm just starting to get into it. I think that it took a while. Hunting, people who go hunting, it's kind of like a black box, if you will. They're gone for a while. You see a picture at the end where they have a deer, and you're like, oh, okay. that's what you did. I have no idea what happened while you're out there, but that's cool. You were gone for a while, like, you know, you missed the game, but whatever, you know, it's just kind of, that was it. And it didn't really interest me all that much, you know. And it wasn't until I started talking with a lot of the hunters around here at Vortex and a lot of other hunters that I've just met along the way where, you know, they don't just kind of talk about like, oh yeah, I got a buck. It's kind of like, oh man, like we were out scouting, we were in talking with the guys from the hunting public. They're like, yeah, we were in Gilly. We were like full Gilly, we were spotting, and then it was like we got down, we left our spotting scopes behind, stalked, and like literally got in deer beds. And I'm like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, dude, like you guys are having a lot of fun out there. It's not just kind of like, you know. And again, I'm speaking from, I guess, my perspective being somebody who's a little bit more of like, I'm into kind of the more action-oriented stuff. I'm not poo-hooing anybody who does the tree stand thing, but you know, it wasn't until I started hearing that there's more than one way to hunt. There's more than one reason to hunt, you know. I also, in addition to wanting to do something more adventurous, I love cooking. And once somebody actually came back and like we cooked venison on the grill, I feel like I've had venison sausage and jerky so many times that it's kind of like, it's like white noise, you know. But like once they brought back a steak and we cooked it on the grill, and I was like, this is one of the greatest things I've ever eaten. Just even sharing food, I was like, that drove me to want to hunt more. But really, yeah, just sharing more than like the end thing, right? I was gone for a while, bam, a buck. It's like sharing more than that. The whole experience of hunting, I think, is, and people these days, I think, are very experiential. I think that, again, the social media and seeing pretty images and awesome videos has made them kind of that way.
And that's, to touch on that, what's changed in the past 5 to 10 years, I think we're seeing more of the middle now. It used to be beginning in the guys at the truck, then you get an impact shot, video's over. Whereas now, the hunting public, that's a huge reason why we wanted to get involved with them for the web series. That's that kind of DIY thing we had talked about. It's accessible for people. You're learning as you're watching it, so I think that's big to touch on too. From DNR's perspective, I won't whine about this too much, but I mean, I think it's just a perception issue for us, and it's something we really strive every day to work on, not just communications people like myself, but staff in the field, staff in the office. I think there's just this perception that we don't care as much, we don't know what we're doing, we don't like doing this stuff, when it just couldn't be farther from the truth. So it's definitely an uphill battle for us, but we're trying hard with things like podcasts, and definitely getting partners like you guys involved helps us carry the water, because the fact of the matter is we could say the sky's blue, and someone in the hunting industry could put out the same post that says the sky's blue, and you're going to see different comments on both of those.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, you know, we've touched on public lands here quite a bit, and, you know, a lot of us have probably spent time on these public places, and you go out to a public property and you see a mowed trail, and you walk that mowed trail to get to a spot where you want to hike, you want to, you know, hang a tree stand, whatever. That mowed trail was there because of, you know, the people that work for your state's Fish and Wildlife Agency. And to be able to support those people, I think, is important, because at the end of the day, we have 3, you know, totally different stakeholder groups here, but we're all on the same exact team. So to not support one is to not support all 3, in my opinion.
And like we mentioned before, we can't get it stuck in this mode of just doing social media and modern tools. Go out and talk to your local DNR staff. That's a huge part of the communication that we do. Is, I wouldn't call it grassroots, but just that person-to-person communication, and that can spread in a community just as fast as social media can. So just go talk to them, pick their brain. They're always happy to talk about that stuff. But I would say that's our biggest challenge is perception, and it's something we're working on. We're very cognizant of it. It's no secret to us, and I'm sure it's no secret to much of the people listening, but we're working on it. So before we start to wrap up here, does anyone have anything they wanted to add? I think we covered a lot of ground today.
Mark, man, Mark took that monster and it really just supercharged the whole thing.
Uncharacteristically
Got a
taking that down today.
Monster energy drink over here. I don't know what level it's at, but
I think it's about a 17.
New sponsor for Wild Wisconsin
Yeah.
next year, Monster Energy Drinks.
So one thing I like to do before we wrap up is I like to ask everyone, relative to the topic, what's one thing you could tell someone if you bump into them on the street and you're assuming that this person knows nothing about what we talked about today. So you've got one opportunity, elevator speech type thing. So Jim, maybe we'll start with you. What's one thing you could tell someone about kind of the way that we communicate with hunters and outdoors people and kind of what it all means and why they should care?
Oh man, I'm usually not good when I go first on these sum up things. I'm a deep thinker. I'll try to come up with some. I guess if I were talking to somebody, I'll repeat something I said a little bit earlier, which is, maybe this person hunts, maybe they don't hunt, but I would say be open-minded to the fact that there are different ways and types of hunting out there, and that it's hard to say one or the other is right or wrong, and realistically speaking, we should probably all be much more open-minded to the other types of hunters that are out there. And what I'm speaking to mainly is, Western hunters, yeah, you guys do awesome stuff, like in some pretty big giant country, big mountains, but the dude back here in Wisconsin who's up in a tree stand, like that guy, you're on the same team, or the guy who really does it for the subsistence lifestyle and the food aspect of it. When he's posting a bunch of pictures of food on Instagram, don't be like, oh, hey, you're just posting pictures of food on Instagram like some, what are you going to do next?
Mm-hmm.
Like go to the coffee shop and post pictures of your latte with,
Yep.
heart and the bubbles or whatever.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, I am. Yeah.
Maybe you are, yeah, but it's kind of like, I guess, that's what I'm referring to, where it's like, if you're on the same team, try not to duke it out. And that's where I'm at. Hopefully that was decent in the
That was
clutch.
pretty darn good for
All
the
right.
first one. Well done.
So, man, I'd say, and thanks, Jim, for taking a lot of what I was going to say there.
Second time that's happened.
You're welcome.
Coincidence?
That's the
I'm not
benefit. That
sure.
is the one benefit to going first.
I think you're a mind reader. But if you run into somebody that seems like they're semi-receptive to the message or interested, or even if they're maybe like opposing, right? Be respectful, and try to educate them in a respectful way that may resonate. Like I said, we're fortunate. We know the whole story, right? And other folks don't. And I mean, this is going to be a long wrap up, like I generally do. So sorry about that. But a case in point, I was just up in Alaska Airport. Guy had a moose that he was bringing back, and the meat was at a processor. He was going to have that shipped back, but he had the skull wrapped and the horns wrapped up in a bag. And man, I think he talked to everybody at the airport. I mean, everybody, whether you hunted, didn't hunt. And actually, interesting enough, because I was kind of, just, I guess, observing, this go on for a while, because I had a lot of time to kill at the airport. But most of the people that talked to him or made comments weren't hunters, and there were a lot of questions like, some people almost were not standoffish, but like, so what are you doing with the meat? Where's the meat? And he'd explain to that person, but always very respectful. And I think a lot of people left informed. So, like Jim said, we're all on the same team, and I guess fill people in, give them the rest of the story, and I think they'll appreciate that.
Do they have XL doors at the Alaska airport for people bringing in moose skulls?
I think they definitely plan for that.
There's like the exact outline of moose horns in the doorway. It's like,
Like
a,
one of those
it's like a
little-
cartoon. You just
Yeah.
put it up and walk through it.
Yep.
Eric, how about you?
Man, for me, I guess it would just be, we kind of talked about how everyone has a platform today. And a lot of the people that are listening to this podcast are either already hunters or, aspiring to be a hunter someday, or someone who maybe just wants more information about it. But for those people, a lot of those people are the same folks who have social media channels and, go out and do this stuff. I think talking about stewardship is something that's really important, because we all have that following, whether it's, you got 20 people who are your, close family and friends that you're friends with on Facebook, or you got a couple thousand people who you're communicating with daily, your message carries weight because people see it. So I think if everyone just kind of had that internal quality control that they thought of before they put something out there into the social media world, first, I think things would be a little bit more positive than they already are. And second, I think from a hunting standpoint, we would all impact that lifestyle that we care so much about in a much better way. Because, to go back to the tongue hanging out and stuff like that, there's nothing wrong with that. But,
it's kind of what happens.
It's kind of what happens,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But to be able to tell that whole story...
The why.
Exactly. Fill in that middle ground, and I think we're going to have a lot of people who are more connecting the dots in the process of hunting, fishing, whatever it is.
Jeff, how about you?
It's pretty much what I was going to say, Eric, but
Yeah, I
it's
should
all right.
have
I'm going last.
This might be tough.
Yeah, just pay attention. Pay attention to what you're doing, because as Eric said, you're going to have a lot of followers, or maybe you don't even have a lot of followers. Let's say you have 2 and one's not a hunter. That one person is going to tell another person, and that one person is going to tell another person. So just pay attention, because we are in the minority when it comes to the general population. And if the majority decides that they don't want us to hunt anymore, then that's what's going to happen, because we won't be able to stop them. So just pay attention to what you're doing, and think about what you're going to do before you hit that post button on your phone.
I'm going to do a quick one. It's just, I think we all have more in common than we think we do. Whether you hunt, hike, like to take the boat out on the lake, chances are you like to be outdoors, whether that's on public lands or not. I think we all just need to find common ground and go from there. I think a lot of people start the discussion about at where you disagree, and you could have gone 5 steps before that and started on, okay, here's at a very basic level what we both agree with. And if you can go out from there, I think you're going to find that when you get to that point you would have started at before, it's not an issue. So I think just be civil too. Man, our Facebook page,
Yeah, be civil.
holy cow. Whew. Man, it is, some of the stuff we get on there is pretty crazy. So before you think about, or before you hit enter on some of that stuff, just there's a human being on the other end, man. Like,
with feelings.
just
and-
think of them. Think of the children, man. But
I'll just add to that also, sir. Go talk to a person at the DNR, and then make a Facebook post about how nice they were.
yeah,
Yeah, seriously. I since I've been the chairman, I've talked to a lot of DNR staff, and they do care. They do care about this stuff. So go and talk to them before you make that comment, and don't make a comment unless you'd say it to their face, frankly.
Oh yeah, that's another good one. So does anyone have any other closing thoughts? That was, wow, I liked that last wrap up. That was really good.
It's so much more fun to say things to people when you don't ever have to see them.
Exactly. Behind the veil of your computer screen.
Keyboard warrior. Yep. So thanks for joining us, everyone. I think we covered a lot today. I want to thank these guys, obviously, like I said, for being great partners and for taking the time to join me today. I think this is a super important topic. I hope you're gonna get some use out of it, whether that's next time you're on social media, you're thinking of some of this stuff, or just finding new ways to share your message and get information. You can find this podcast and all of our other podcasts and also our web series at dnr.wi.gov, keywords Wild Wisconsin. They're on our YouTube channel, WIDNR TV, iTunes and Stitcher. You can search Wild Wisconsin on both of those. And then, as I mentioned, we've got social media pages, and they're out there. We want to interact with you. We want to hear from you. So use them. That's what they're for. So I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. Thank these guys again for joining me. And we will see you next time on the DNR's Wild Wisconsin Off the Record podcast.